Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 150. Hooray! Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Shirley Davis. Shirley is president and CEO of SDS Global Enterprises, a strategic development solutions firm that specializes in human resources strategy, talent management, leadership effectiveness, culture transformation, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Davis has worked in more than 30 countries on 5 continents and delivers more than 100 speeches a year to a wide range of industries, sectors, and sizes. She continues to consult, coach, and train leaders at all levels, including corporate CEOs, C-suite executives, and board of directors. Shirley is the author of several books, including Living Beyond What If, Release the Limits and Realize Your Dreams, Reinvent Yourself, Strategies for Achieving Success in Every Area of Your Life, and the first ever DEI for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Dummies. It's probably the entire title, so I needed to read that, which was published in January 2022 by the global publishing company John Wiley & Sons. Her latest book, Inclusive Leadership for Dummies, was also published by Wiley and released in May 2024. Shirley, so glad to have you on the show today.
It is such an honor. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Likewise. And ladies and gentlemen, just so that you know, I literally took the bio that I got and I cut it in half, which means that there's even so much more that Dr. Davis does that I didn't even read about. But I'm sure at the end, when she tells you more about how you could reach her, you'll find all that information and more. So let's dive into it. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about yourself, your pathway, your journey? I'm always curious about that, in particular, since I also coach, and since I also coach leaders and have written books for leaders specifically. I'm really curious to know how you got into this space and what kind of like brought you to the speaking, the coaching, all of that.
Well, lots of stories to tell, lots of experiences, but just in a nutshell, I have worked in human resources for over 30 years. I got into that accidentally. I didn't grow up saying one day I want to be an HR veteran or HR professional, nor did I grow up saying one day I wanted to be a coach. But I think though, as I started to define my destiny and look at my purpose and understand my passions in life, my jobs that I kept being attracted to, the kind of roles that I thrived in, it started leaving breadcrumbs. And I thought, you know what? I like this role. I like that role. I started out in banking and financial services when I was in college to just get extra money. But through that, I went from teller to teller supervisor to branch manager, and then moved into the customer service area where you would come in and open up your deposit accounts. I was really good at it. Great at customer service, great at interacting with people, and wonderful at sales, right? Because I just love making sure that people got what they came in for and that I was able to connect with them. Long story short, I ultimately was asked to move over into training and train other customer service representatives. Loved it. Because training falls in human resources, that's where I got my start. Got the foot in the door, became a training director, and then worked in every area of HR, from employee relations to recruiting to leadership development, and certainly then got into diversity, equity, and inclusion and culture and leadership coaching. So that's my journey. I worked at various industries in the utility and energy industry, in addition to financial services and banking. I also worked in retail sales back in the day. If you might remember Circuit City, I might be dating myself, but also, and then I moved to nonprofit and working at the world's largest HR association, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. So I have had a journey through corporate America, through nonprofit. I work very diligently diligently in my community. I'm a missionary. I travel abroad, helping, to build, developing countries and emerging markets, and working with people who look like me, right? That may be underserved, may be underrepresented, may be marginalized from those marginalized groups. But I have always had this passion to help the underdog, but to help people who really want to get a larger vision for themselves, and they just need guidance and direction. And the last thing I'll say too is I just believe that so many of the experiences that I've gone through in my life were not just only for me to get better and stronger, but I've learned from my coaching experiences that this is about going through those things so that you can help other people and you can empathize in a more effective way.
Okay. Well, that was a very short answer. So now I have nothing to parse out of that one. No, I loved it. That was great. So let's actually discuss, if you don't mind, a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a common misnomer out there. I know you, because of your HR background, probably could really speak to this, besides for your personal experience,
Yeah.
about people needing to follow your passion
Yeah.
and kind of like have a real clear sense already as an undergrad of what you want to be. We invest boatloads of money into college education, which may or may not, this is not the conversation for the ROI on college and all of that. But I
Yeah.
often feel that we don't really know what we're good at until we've tried, until we've sat in different seats, until we've had opportunities, whether we've requested those opportunities, which is great and people should,
Yeah.
or they fell in our lap. Regardless, your journey tells me, and I think mine too in different ways, but let's stay with yours, really tells us all that you don't necessarily have to have it all figured out on day one. And
That's
oftentimes where you end is going to be way off from where you start, but
yeah.
it's going to be through the trial and error of life and through experiences and all of that. So I'm curious what your take is, and what advice would you give to somebody who's starting out, or maybe they've been working for a few years and they're not really so happy in their current position? How would you advise them to enjoy the moment
Yeah.
as well as explore opportunities, and what would that look like for people?
Yeah, you're right. We don't necessarily wake up and say, this is my destiny, right? This is what my purpose is. This is my compelling why. It is going through some of life's challenges, life's experiences, and learning from them. I always talk about leveraging the lessons, the losses, and leveraging the learnings from the things that we go through, because I believe that our destiny and our purpose does leave breadcrumbs. I believe that we were created because of who we are and the gifts that were instilled in us. I believe that there's something all of us have that we have to look for, find inside, that we can then give to others and be a blessing and help enrich others' lives. So when we become more self-actualized, and that is really about being more introspective about the things you go through in life, good, bad, indifferent, or really, really bad. I've had some really bad experiences, from being in, near-death car accidents, being held at gunpoint in a bank robbery, going through, relational breakups, going through career setbacks, financial devastation. Whew, and I pinned a lot of that in my book, but it has helped me to see in my life what I was able to find within, is that I have strength, I have courage, I have faith, I have, this superpower where I can always be, persistent, resilient. I always bounce back, and I look for the good regardless of how bad it was. I think those are important. It's important to have people around you who can also help you process, who can help you start to think about the things you're experiencing. And I always say it's really good to have a great board of advisors, personal board of advisors, who can help you think through some of that, see things you may not see. So surrounding yourselves with various perspectives, with various views and ideals, that's what has helped me. And then I think the other part about it is just being honest about who you are, where you are, And the fact that we still have so much that we can contribute every day we wake up, I believe that we have something that we can do and someone that we can be a blessing to. And if we look at life from that lens, then I think there's always an opportunity for us to say, I have this gift, this power, this strength that I want to hone in so that I can make things better, make people better, and certainly, that I can live a better life.
Mm. Okay. I mean, we could probably spend the rest of the time that we have allocated for just talking about the
Yeah,
breadcrumbs and how to do
yeah,
that introspection. Because a lot of people, I genuinely think, have a hard time. They have a hard time seeing their blind spots. I know I certainly did.
yeah.
And the structure you established for us, I think, is very helpful.
Mhm.
The idea that you bounce ideas off of other people, that you are
Yeah,
thinking on a regular basis, and you're asking yourself the question, how does this align with who I am and where I
yeah,
want to go?
yeah,
How do you help other people? Let's focus, because you mentioned this before. You talked about missionary work and other things that you do that's outward facing and trying
yeah.
to help other people. How do you help people who are maybe stuck in their own way of thinking? They have maybe a fixed mindset or a negative sense of self.
Right.
How do you create or help them create a vision that is sufficiently empowering, not just to motivate them, but to
Yeah.
actually take action and start to course correct or to change their chart a new path, so to speak?
I think it's so important that we start within, right? And a lot of that is, I always have people think about this. Think about as you were growing up, what were some of the things that as a kid, the things that you dreamed about when there was no limitations? You didn't have a whole lot of life experiences that kind of interrupt and sometimes skewed your vision or your views of life. Think about the great feedback you got when you were in school. What was it that your teachers always said? What was it that your parents and your loved ones saw in you that was a gift and a talent? Because those are things that sometimes we can overlook because we get distracted by so many things that are happening in us. So I had to do that same thing every single year for 15 years. And this is when I was working, I would get away, take my last week of vacation at the end of the year. You know how everybody kind of shuts down. And that would be my time to get away and do some reflection over the year. And if you do it every year, you continue. I was using that time to look at what worked well, what didn't work so well, what did I learn from that, and how am I going to be better? How am I going to, course correct and shift some of my thinking, right? And here's the other thing, 87% of the things that we say to ourselves about ourselves tends to be negative. So I have people write down all of the great strengths and talents that they bring. And I also have them think about what are the fears, the things that paralyze them and keep them paused on the side of the road of life. Why is that? When you write it down and you get it out of your head, you're also releasing some of the power that constrains you from moving forward. And then I have them write down beside their dreams and beside the fears that keep them from realizing those dreams. Well, what would happen if that fear came true? Write it down. And so, what I'm teaching them to do is to visualize the power that's within, and a lot of times to minimize the visual that they create themselves with their fixed mindset of this fear. Most of the things that people fear really never happen, but it does in their minds. So I try to get them to think about in their minds, how can they move from being in that fixed mindset to possibilities, to new opportunities. I tell people all the time, stop living in your known hell, because there is an unknown heaven, right? And so we tend to hold on to what's familiar, what's comfortable, what I see right here, right now, my present bias, versus looking at what is an unknown possibility and opportunity that I might be missing if I just get out of my own way.
Mm. Oh my. Okay. But one of the things, many, but one of the things that I really do appreciate, and I don't know, I know I don't do enough of it, and I suspect probably 90+% people also don't, is
Yeah.
this point on reflection.
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I
Yeah.
do I do training on a variety of topics. One of them is delegation. And
Yeah.
there are 13 steps in my model. And
Hmm.
I think maybe it's number 13 is reflect, review and reflect, right? The idea that
Yes. Yes.
you have to take time to go back to the process and say what worked and what didn't.
That's
So
right.
let's say it's a nonprofit and you have an annual campaign and you do your marketing and you do your fundraising, all the things that you're doing, what worked and what didn't. Go through
That's
everything
right.
because you're going to do it again in a year from now. And a
Yeah.
year's a really, really long time, right? I could barely
Right.
remember sometimes
Yeah.
5 minutes ago what I needed to do, let
That's
alone a
right.
year from now, a year ago, where I was, and all of that. And so taking the time to reflect, depending, of course, on the nature of what it is, if you're trying to be more productive, to reflect on your day, on your week,
That's right.
if you want to live a different life, every so often, whether it's once a year, maybe even more frequently for people, especially
True.
as you're beginning the process of making transformation in your life, I think those things are really, really critical.
That's
So
right.
I think people don't do enough of it. And I'm curious to know, from your perspective, why that is,
Mhm.
and what are some strategies that you help people go through that would help them be more reflective, both in the moment and also over time, so that there's this continued sense of growth and
Yeah.
positive direction.
Yeah, very similar to, what I was sharing of what I've learned how to do. And that is count every opportunity, and I always say too that, tests, trials, and troubles come. That's just life, right? Sometimes people call it Murphy's Law, but I always say too that those tests and trials are brilliantly disguised, right, with opportunities. So don't miss those. So I'm always asking them to think about when you were going through that, what were you feeling? What were you experiencing? Why were you blocked that way? And I think, too, part of this journey is understanding what were some of the messages that we heard growing up that has now informed our thinking. So that means you have to then retrain and relearn some different ways of thinking. I think that's really, really important. And then I have people write down their life plan. I know that kind of sounds long term, but I want people to think about, if you go through your life and let's say now you're going, because one thing we all will meet at the end is we all will transition from this life to the next life. And so it is writing down what would you want people to do and to say, and how would you want them to celebrate the life that you lived? So, it's kind of like starting with the end in mind. So it's writing down what would your life plan look like? Think about your gifts, your talents, your passions, the things that drive you, the things that you would do even if you never got paid, the things that make you wake up every morning with joy and excitement. What are those things? Write those things down. And I want you to think about what would you want people to say that you did, the difference that you made, how you impacted the world and those that were around you throughout your life. Now, when you write all of that down, I want you to now back up and let's now go start with how do we do that today? And then how do we do that next month? And then what are some things that we do by the end of this year? Or what are things you want to accomplish for the next year? So you have it broken down into, I call it digestible and micro chunks of things that you can take action on. And it helps people to then see, wow, I can do this. Do you adjust it along the way? Absolutely. But there's some core things about who you are that won't ever change, right? For me, I am a passionate person. I love people. I am very, clear about my faith, my direction in life. And I know I've got some skills and gifts that I have inside of me that are not going to change. I'll never, ever be an accountant. I will never, ever be an IT professional because that's not how I'm wired. That's not really my personality. But I want people to do the things that are aligned with their values, but also that are aligned with how they're wired and the gifts and strengths that they have, and not try to play to those things that you don't have, play to your strengths.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Let's say you had a protege that was going into HR and really wanted to make a difference in a company, and they were
Yeah,
choosing between two companies. And imagine, let's say, the Wheel of Life or one of these kinds of tools that we use to
yeah,
measure how the company, let's say
yeah.
um, it's health and overall well-being,
Okay.
and you have one company that scores relatively low on leadership, but pretty high on culture. And then you have another company that scores low on culture, but higher on leadership. You might say to me that they're the same thing. I'm curious to get your response, but which one would you advise, all other things being equal? Which
Yeah.
one would you say is more important for somebody to be walking into as far as choosing employment, a place to work, a place to be, a place that has a strong culture
Yes.
where there's somewhat of a leadership void, or the leadership is strong, but somehow the culture has not
Mhm.
really develop the way that it needs to.
Yeah. So let me give you my HR answer, and then I'm going to give it to you from, experience, and even me as when I was moving up in the world of work, and seeking those kinds of positions. I truly believe that a company's culture is tied directly to the effectiveness of its leaders. Leaders are the thermostats in any organization. Leaders are the ones that really kind of create the environment, they create the temperature, and they create the space in which we as workers come in and work. Yes, I work for the leader, but I also am looking to see, how is that leader living the values? How is that leader treating me particularly? And all of those behaviors, experiences, norms, and values, that's what makes up culture anyway. But those things are part of the ways that leaders have to act, the practices that they carry out, and the behaviors that they demonstrate. So I think that the two are very, very linked. If I had to choose, I would look for both, but and I've been in those situations where I've had, don't think this is a great leader, but the culture is great. And the reason why I would say then choose the culture, because culture is something that takes a long time to build. And if it's a great culture, leaders can be developed, or leaders can be held accountable, or leaders come and go. But culture is something that is, sometimes I always say, it's like the wind. You don't always see it, but you can certainly experience it. So we need more leaders. Yes, we need great leaders. Leaders are the ones that build culture. But if you've already got a culture that's there, I'm going to take it that this leader either won't be able to stay there and be successful, or that there's going to be a level of accountability that's going to cause that leader to have to exit.
What's something that's true in your mind that almost nobody agrees with you on that position?
About leadership?
About anything. It could
Yeah,
be
well,
leadership,
it
or
could be.
just something that you share and people push back and they don't accept it right away, and you kind of have to work a little harder to make your point.
Oh gosh, there's a couple of things. So I would say one of the things I always talk about is the fact that no matter how different you are from the other person, I don't care how adverse or opposing your opinions are, there's still something you have in common with every single person that you encounter. Now, the work begins when, if you believe that, and that's how I've come to live my life, is recognizing that I don't care the worst person, how they treat me, what they say, there's still something that we have in common with each other. And I usually take on the challenge of trying to find that shared commonality, that shared meaning, and looking beyond what I see, recognizing that what might be happening with them has something more to do with on the inside, and maybe they have not had someone that sees them beyond just the way that they act. So that's an important lesson that I teach in workplace culture, team building, and even for leaders. That's one piece. I think another one, every day that I do this work, particularly around helping people get a larger vision for themselves, is too many times people push back on understanding that they all have a superpower. It's like, well, I haven't tapped into it. I don't know what it is. I don't see that. And 90% of people that I talk to around the world, I ask the question, how many of you really know what your compelling why is? What's your passion and your purpose in life? By show of hands. And 90% of the hands don't raise. So we've got a lot of work to do, both individually, to understand that we all have a superpower. We have a why, something that is compelling, that should drive us every day. And then the other piece of it is recognizing that there is something on the inside of every person that you have in common with. So you see, I went individual as well as collectively.
Yeah. And if we had more time, I probably would try to dig down deeper in the whole psychology piece, just specifically around the negativity and why there's so much negative messaging and why we've
Yeah.
internalized so much of that negative messaging. But for the moment, I want to make it a little bit more of an upbeat question for you. And that is, you're on the stage a lot, you speak to many, many audiences. Tell us about your biggest aha moment on stage, or something that wasn't just a regular talk or regular presentation. Something different happened. There was some kind of awareness in the crowd, some kind of response, some kind of
Yeah.
a light bulb went off in your head. What was going on?
Number of years ago, I always have given speeches, gosh, since I was a young girl. I've always, whether it's been on a debate team or whether it's been, in pageants. I was a pageant, buff for about 20 years, competing in pageants. And so I've always given speeches, but I haven't always personalized them. And I have a speech coach. Many people may know Les Brown. Les Brown has been my speech coach, my mentor, my friend. He's a world-renowned motivational speaker. You can certainly Google him and you will be absolutely blown away with motivation and inspiration. Well, he's been in my life for the last 22 years, and we talk a lot. He used to say to me all the time, Shirley, you got to get out of your head so that you can step into your greatness. I never really knew all of what that meant, but I ultimately got to a place where I was blocked, right? So I was good on giving tips and tools and strategies and data and statistics and, telling about all of the things that people needed to do. But it was a moment when I took a chance at sharing more of my own personal story and to an audience. I injected it throughout little pieces here and there. And can I tell you that I always thought people were blown away because she's so smart. She knows all of this data and statistics and this research. When I told some of my personal story and I began to, I could feel the passion and the enthusiasm that was coming from me, but it was even more of an epiphany when I could see how people were seeing themselves through my stories. And so now I've become this master storyteller because I realized that people don't remember statistics and data and research studies. They remember how you made them feel through your stories. They remember when you've connected with them on a very personal level. And when you, the speaker on the stage, on the big stage, feels human to them. That was golden nuggets for me. And I've been doing it ever since. And that took my speaking profile up 10 notches.
Wow. I bet if I asked you, you would concur with this. But I'm going to make one point and then I want to transition to our last question because we've got so
Sure.
much still to get to. What you just said, I think, is as relevant for leaders as it is for speakers. And so,
Yes.
yes, if you're a speaker, like I just delivered, for example, productivity training, 5-part course online, whatever it was. And I was constantly interjecting. It wasn't full on stories, but it was little snippets or little nuggets from things that
Yeah.
I do on a daily basis. And you see
Mhm.
people relate to that. You see people that you're connecting them to the tips in a totally different way. It's not just prioritize your tasks and block out
Yeah.
your calendar and yada yada. It's this is what I did, this is what I used to do, this is why this is better, and kind of like making it more personal. And if
Yep.
you're, for example, a leader, you're at a team meeting or a full-on event or whatever it might be,
Right.
and you're sharing, you're lifting the curtain, you're telling a story about
Yeah.
yourself, that
Yes.
can be such a powerful way. And people
Mhm.
are afraid to be vulnerable. People are
That
afraid to look awkward. We don't want to admit our past failures. But like you said, it's not only
it's
more memorable,
powerful.
but it's
Yeah.
where the real learning and the real connection occurs. And if you want people to support you, they have to be able to relate to you. And they can't
Mhm.
relate to you if you're on a totally different level and you never humanize yourself. So that I think is just a very
Yes.
important point. I know if you want to elaborate, feel free to do so, and then we'll get to the final question.
You totally summed it up. And it's one of the things too, I'm experiencing this because our organization, we do a lot of organizational assessments and audits, and we do leadership assessments as well. And we find that there's a huge leadership gap in our organizations around the world. We need better, more effective leaders who can connect better, who understand the people that work for them on a more personal level. And you're right, they have kind of shied away from that a bit because they haven't wanted to be vulnerable and they don't necessarily think that authenticity is a strength, it's a weakness. And yet I have found that being vulnerable, being inspirational, and getting to know your people on a personal level through storytelling has become a powerful leadership skill. So I do a lot of work now, even with leaders, on the power of telling your stories and opening up, because when you do that, you give your teams permission to do the same.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Shirley, I know you've kind of
Yeah.
alluded to this before, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What would you say was the biggest mistake that you have made that has
Wow.
set you up for future success?
Biggest mistake. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I've learned from them, and now I can tell a lot of them. One of the biggest mistakes I would say I made early on in my career that really helped set me up for success was I held on so much to the control. And I wasn't always willing to ask for help. I wasn't always willing to delegate. And I felt like I needed to be the smartest one in the room and the smartest one on my team. And a lot of that came from socialization. It came from some experiences. And I worked for some real bad, toxic, ineffective leaders who I believed what they were saying about me that were demeaning, devaluing, disrespectful. I believed a lot of that. So one of the things that I had to shift at mid part of my career was I decided I wanted to become the best boss ever. And I needed to train people, first of all, recruit people, but train them so that I could then be more strategic and be more attentive to them and not feel like I got to do everything. I got to be everything to everybody. And then I got to hold on to all the reins and all the control. That was a big mistake early in my career. And what I have learned now, later in my career, is the power of delegation, the power of empowering others, because now I'm able to get so much more done because I've got great people around me on my team who I value, who I respect, but who I leverage to help me get more work done than I would be able to do it by myself.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to transition now to rapid fire. My first question
Okay.
for you is your favorite country to visit.
I've been to 36 countries. I've got a couple of them that I absolutely love. But if I could go back to Singapore, I would absolutely love to go back. I love learning culture, but Singapore is a good one.
Awesome. The toughest crowd to impress.
Kids.
Kids. Okay. 2 to 3 daily activities to stay young and active.
I'm a power walker, right? So I walk 6 miles a day. That's consistent for me. That's one. I think the other part for me is just self-care. So I love getting massages and pampering myself. There's nothing wrong with self-care. It's not selfish. And then for me, it is finding my happy place, which for me is by the water, which is why I moved to Tampa Bay to be right by the beaches.
If you could learn any new language, which would it be?
Actually, Greek.
Greek.
Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a woman of faith and I'm in ministry. And you heard me say I was a missionary as well. But as I read the Bible for me, I'd love to learn what are some of the Greek interpretations of some of those things and wisdom that I live by.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how funny are you?
8.
8.
I have
Okay.
people in stitches all the time. You
Okay.
gotta
You
laugh.
didn't,
That's a part of
you didn't,
your.
yeah, this is too serious a conversation to crack any jokes,
Yes.
but I'm with you.
Yes.
And finally, a productivity tip that helps you to get more done.
You go faster when you have more people that will help you get there instead of going alone. You go further when you got other people. You may try to go fast alone, but you go further when you've got other people.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you've shared a ton. I wish we had time for more.
It
How
was
can people
great. It was
find
wonderful.
you? How can people learn more about your work?
Oh, yes.
Where should
Please
they
link
go?
in with me. Link in with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn learning author. Got 8 courses out there. And go to my website at drshirleydavis.com.
There you go. And finally, Shirley, you've given us so much. We didn't even tap into half the things, if not more, that I read in the bio. So leave us, please, with one final life lesson, one nugget, just to wrap up our conversation.
Every place you go, every person you encounter, and everything that you do, leave it better than the way that you found it. That's how we should all live.
Okay. Very inspiring. I will certainly be thinking about that today. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure. By the way, I didn't even mention this before, but it's very serendipitous. So we're talking now because with my mastermind group, we're in the middle of doing productivity. I'm sorry, the 7 habits of Stephen Covey. And we just hit on habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. I meant to mention it before, but you went into so many places, I couldn't even go back to it, but I wanted to mention it. So great stuff. Great stuff. Really a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you very much for coming on to Lead to Succeed. And I cannot wait to share this with my audience.
Continued success to you and to all of the audience. Thank you.
All the best now. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.